Good evening, everyone. How y'all doing? I know I'm still trying to collect myself.
It's hard to follow that.
I mean, really, can we give it up again for Christian and Susan? My name is Carrie Nath. I have the honor of being the Director of Equitable Access here, where we believe in diversity and inclusion at the Blue Barn. You just have to say those words as much as humanly possible, right? Part of my job, if you can call it a job, part of my play is engagement, putting together engagement activities. And so sometimes I reach out to folks, or sometimes, as is the Blue Barn way, Susan gets an email or a phone call, and somebody will say, hey, I was Googling Larry Kramer because I knew him, and I came across this production in Omaha, and my aunt is sponsoring the production, and I was really involved with the quilt, and my name is Jim Benson, and I'd love to come and just be a part of this because I think it's so important. So, ladies and gentlemen, and folks, and everyone, Jim Benson. So Jim is from Omaha. He grew up in Grand Forks.
Grand Island.
Grand Island, sorry.
Yeah.
Other state. He grew up in Grand Island.
Grand Forks would have been even worse.
Even more challenging, right?
The Grand Island is bad enough, trust me.
We've been working on this all day. No, just kidding. And then went out, like many of us, built a life. Sometimes we build it here, sometimes we go out and build it and come back. And part of building that life was being a big part of building that quilt. And is instrumental in bringing in those beautiful pieces that are in the lobby as well, which you probably saw before the show and certainly could spend a little more time with after the show. So this is, as all of our Afterwords, it's a conversation, right? We're gonna start, hear a little bit from Jim. I've got a couple of questions maybe to throw your way if necessary, and then we'll open it up to your questions or things you want to share about such a powerful, powerful piece. So, we talked a little bit today about, how do you come out of those 1,000 points of light, right? So we're just gonna bring them back into the room. Those 1,000 points of light were those, as Jim put it with the quilt, that quilt became about the people who left us and the people who were left behind. And how do we celebrate those 1,000 points of light? So I'm gonna ask you, how did that come about?
How did the quilt come about?
How did the quilt come about, and just that thing of celebrating and bringing forward and sharing story?
Yeah, so the quilt itself came about in that there was a march in San Francisco, and Cleve Jones, Mike Smith, and a bunch of other folks who ended up being the founders of the quilt, Gert, etc. They all had a bunch of sheets, and they just spray painted people's names on it, and they took it to the City Hall in San Francisco, and they're like, we're really mad. Check us out, we're so mad. And then they went home, and they had a little party, and they just basically threw them in the backyard. They looked back and they said, well, that kind of looks like a quilt. Oh, shit. And then, so you fast forward like a couple years later, and if you go out into the, out there, you'll see that one of them kind of looks like a little map. And that was the panel that greeted me as a young, queer Nebraskan that was never allowed to ever talk about himself or be himself. So when I was in Grand Island, I was like a super angry punk rocker because it was a real outlet that I could use. But that was the first thing that ever greeted me that like let me just be me. It was an instant agency tool. And from that, I joined up, and after that, the quilt just grew and grew and grew because so many people unfortunately made it necessary for that to do so. So all of the pictures that you saw on the backdrop, I was at every one of those displays in Washington, D.C., from the first one where it just fit in the ellipse to the last one where it was so large that we got sued for it. So, yeah, the 1,000 Points of Light speech and the importance of what happens in the third act here is so personal to me, because I lived that crazy, that trying to find yourself while everything is falling apart, and knowing by name all of these people. So when I first walked into this room on Wednesday, and I took a picture of the stage and I sent it to my old boyfriend Danny, and I could have married that guy. He was so awesome, and still is so awesome, but I couldn't get close to him because he was so traumatized by all the people that he lost. That trade-off, the where did you go? It was very, very real.
One of the things that Jim has also, or is writing, or has written, I think it might still be in progress, a beautiful book, and shared about 4 pages with us in the office, and I was going back through those again today, and these lines like, "This is a memorial blanket of honesty," because this was a room that people could walk into, and they could, that these squares became being able to tell a story and being about who you really are, I guess, is how that struck me. And you had said, I want to make sure I talk about like the parents and how the quilt really brought people not just out, but together, whether it was their child or who it might be.
So the beauty of the quilt is that it is a tangible, tactile realization of emotion, of loss, of stories, of people, of hurt, and that tactileness transcends the yap box that's attached to our heads. So we could take that to Mormon temples, to we'll just say normally unfriendly sororities, Teamster halls, where you couldn't come in and say, "Hey, we're a bunch of fags and we're gonna come in and talk to you today." It's like, no, I don't think so. But hey, we've got this quilt and it's like, I don't know, fabric. And they're like, okay, fabric doesn't seem quite so threatening. But one of the beautiful things, and this is like one of the most powerful experiences for me, is in 91, 92, so many people were passing away that we couldn't get a large enough space for our workshop. So we got Fred Meyer's on Capitol Hill in Seattle, which was basically like the size of a baker's, right? Like it was a grocery store that had closed. And the whole thing was filled with tables and sewing machines and sergers and everything you would need to make panels. And what would happen is there was this door on the corner, and people would come in through that door, and space was out there. So you'd have like a table, like over here, you'd have a table, and there'd be a whole bunch of queens around the table going, "Oh my God," and they'd be like, changing stuff and sewing things and doing all this and whatnot, and they would just be going kind of nuts. But what they were actually doing was dealing with the fact that all of their friends were dying, like kind of in real time. Then this couple would enter over at the door, and they would just kind of stand. This is about as dark as I'm going to get on the stage. So they kind of stand in the shadows, and they just kind of watch. And that would be the parents of this kid who the panel was being made for. The parents would have been the ones that kicked the kid out and said, "Don't ever darken my door, go away." And now they have to come back and meet their kid posthumously through this group of people. And those conversations could never have happened without something like the quilt. There wouldn't have been that locus, that focus, that direction. And it is humbling and scary when you're working with something like that and you realize one day, oh my God, I'm actually helping. And I can tell you exactly when that was, but it's another story. I've got too many stories. But that one story, that interaction there is what really does it for me about the Names Project, is encapsulates the magic. And when you're talking about the book, my book is actually about how to reduce toxicity in the office place. So it's not like a beautiful huggy book. It's actually a really depressing read where I actually sit there and categorically go through, here's all the different ways human beings treat themselves really badly, and unfortunately I've got 59 years worth of experience with this. But I start off, because I don't seem to know that I'm living in an era of oppression again, actually describing these stories and talking about how the Names Project and other things that I worked on were always visual. And when you bring visualizations into the things that human beings do, the conversations that you have get better. They get more human. They get more directed. You remember what the results of them are. And see, I told you, just push my button.
It's okay. That's all right. And you know, we talked about there's so many things we can talk about, so many places we could go, and certainly I think the last question we'll ask of ourselves up here on this piece of paper is, where do we go from here, and what does this mean now? Right? Because Lord knows there's no toxicity at all in our culture right now.
We've solved that zone.
But I want to take some time for you all. You just saw this, or I think probably everybody, you know, anybody can come to these. You don't have to come to the show to come to an afterword or an engagement event. They're always free and open to the public. But I think you all were here for the performance. It feels that way. So I'm wondering if there's anything you want to share, if there are questions you have for Jim and this experience. One of the other things that struck me when you said, here's this one kid, or that the quilt just kept getting bigger,
yeah.
Another fact you had in there, it started off to be the size of a gymnasium, and when it was done, if you want to call it done, it was 50 square miles of quilt, of names, of people.
Yeah, when I first joined, you could put it in a van and drive it around, and then when I left, it had to be shipped via rail.
Yeah, a lot of names and a lot of beautiful memories.
Yep, and a lot of anger.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, any questions, comments, things you want to toss into the discussion?
Oh, sorry. Where is it housed now?
It is now back in San Francisco. So it used to be right on Castro in San Francisco. Then it moved for reasons which I've never been able to fathom to Atlanta, and it stayed there for a long time. And now it has been, well, I'll just say repatriated, and it is tended to by people that call themselves the handmaidens of the quilt, which I'm lucky enough to be one of. It's 40 years, you would think this crap wouldn't choke me up anymore. But it has always had a very dedicated staff of curators and art historians and artists who are actively working on the panels all the time, because they're fabrics, so they fray, they decay, and it's we're lucky that that they're around.
So can you visit the quilt?
You can visit. Yeah. So the question was, can you visit the quilt? And so you can visit the workshop. You may need to make an appointment now, but I think you can just stop by. But what you won't see is the quilt, because the building just happens to not be 50 square miles. If there is someone that you're looking for in the quilt, you can go to aidsquilt.org and type their name in, and you can find their panel and the section that it is attached to. And if you need to do something with that at some point, like we did here, you just simply call them and say, I would like this, and then they will charge you. But they can ship those panels out to you. I mean, they would prefer that you know what you're doing with them, but I guarantee you that if someone from Omaha needed one of those 12 by 12s, that either I or someone from BLUEBARN could help you out.
Are all of them 12 by 12, the panels themselves?
No, the panels themselves are 3 by 6, and they're sewn into 12-foot by 12-foot panels, and very uniform. And then we lay those out in 4-section groups with 3-foot walkways when we do them on the ground. And then that's what you saw in the mall, the really long one in the mall. That was all those. In '93 when we went, it rained unexpectedly and very heavily. Underneath each of those 24 by 24 foot sections, we have put a bunch of visqueen just in case something bad happens. And we had the entire quilt, all at that time, I think 48.5 square miles of it or something like that, folded up in 1.5 minutes. Wow. It was stunning. And I brought some pictures, but I don't think we can show them. But I do have one picture that I can show anybody that wants to see it, of this woman after we loaded all of those in the truck, and she had just been walking to work and was like, they need help. And she's like soaked, her wallet's ruined, everything, she's, all of her IDs are destroyed, and she has this biggest smile because she knows that she did something.
And I think too, there are some other pictures. I went through those pictures, and if you want to, I don't know if you want to take those t-shirts out and show them too. The goodie bag that we can put out down here so you can walk by and see. I mean, the pictures are extraordinary.
Sorry to
Yep.
interrupt. We can project them.
Okay.
Oh,
The pic
okay.
of these two.
Nope, not that.
Okay. So I will go through this. I will say, Larry Kramer's not the only one with a shirt. So this
So
is
that
yes?
they're rolling behind you.
Oh Jesus. Okay, this is me when I was like super cute, right? This is actually during the rainfall. So the rock is actually the real color of what's behind me, and I'm under a giant piece of visqueen holding it up while people are loading the stuff into the trucks, and I look reasonably happy. Not like now, I'm pretty morose now. What's next? Oh, wait, there I am, even more Twinkie. So if you go out front and you see the Cal Anderson panel, here I am sewing, actually, that Cal Anderson panel in my dining room. Cal was a state senator in Washington State. In the other panel that I didn't make, his domestic partnership agreement with his partner Eric is up there because people couldn't get married then. And in the panel that I made, I sewed his entire voting record into that. So if you want to play with it, just know that I literally broke every rule in panel creation to make that panel. No hard materials, no paper, no gathers, no this, no that.
That's your punker background.
My mother's here, she'll tell you that I'm very bad at following directions, but very good at getting them. All right, roll the tape. Okay, so this is this. Okay, that's actually Cal. Hey, Cal. This is the logo that I made for the 1993 Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Parade March and Freedom Rally in Seattle, June 27th. Which, if you ever wondered where the GPTQ, LMNOP, QRST 15 plus 44 came from, I'm afraid that I was partially responsible for that. So this was the first Pride March that was inclusive. And being Seattle, we had public hearings to find out who was gay enough to be included in the 1993 Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Pride Parade March and Freedom Rally in Seattle, June 27th. And that's Cal there giving his speech about that. And roll tape again. That's Harvey Fierstein in front of the same thing, just to show you that, like, hey, Harvey Fierstein. Man. This is my favorite thing on the planet. So the panel that I was talking about that was the one that made me go through all of this crazy stuff. The guy that is in this panel, Francis Edward Elliott, was the project manager for the Seattle Transit Tunnel, which was one of the first projects that I worked on at the end of it. And this is his panel, and there was a water leak in one of the stations. And so we snuck in on a weekend because we had keys. And we sandblasted his panel into the granite. So a little bit of guerrilla art there for you. Only in Seattle would I do that. I would not do that in probably any other city. And there it is again, kind of draped over the side. If any of you have ever flown through the Denver airport and seen all the art in the Denver airport, that's partially due to Ed, but it's also done by a guy named Jack Mackey. And Jack Mackey was the TED artist on this, and so he's the one that actually did the sandblasting. Unfortunately for y'all, this is the picture of that woman. That doesn't work so well. So we can keep going. Here she is. Here she is. This is the woman that was super happy. You can see, or some of you can see, it is unbelievably wet there, and the amount that it rained in such a short time was absolutely crazy. So if you see other 12 by 12 panels of the quilt, you'll see that a lot of them have like little gray marks on the side, and that's the mud from this particular event. And if you wanted to see a room full of unbelievably giddy people, you should have seen the wrap party for the Panic Rainful, and there was a lot of drinking that night. And that's me and my old boyfriend Rob. God, he was hot. Rob is 64 now, and he's still unbelievably hot. This was at this is like 5 minutes before that rainfall. It was crazy. Like, I used to be so androgynous. Now I'm just a dude. That's Roger Gladden. So the important thing about Roger Gladden is he's also originally from the area. So Omaha and Kansas City. He was my co-chair for the Names Project for several years. Very complex guy. He is still alive, and I'm stunned. Okay, I think, I don't know, are there any more pictures? I think that's it, right? Oh, no, there's some quilt and some people being happy with the quilt. You can see here, this is putting together the 24 by 24s, so you can see that this one ends here, and you can see there's 3 others that are being joined up. Each of these have the grommets in them, and then we tie them together with cable ties. I had a huge handful of cable ties left over, so it was one of my gifts to the theater when I came here the other day. I was like, I really don't have use for these anymore. And there's Cal's panel. Oh, these are the panels out front. So yeah, so these bits here, that's his voting record, and you can see the kind of the Washington State flag just to the right of that is their domestic partnership agreement. Just very quickly down here on the left, the guy next to Cal is a guy named Stephen Farmer. Stephen was an airline attendant. Like just everybody said he had like movie star good looks, so he got anything that he wanted, and that included getting him sick, but it also got him in trouble at one point with the law. And so while he was in jail, they forced him to get an HIV test. And then they based his conviction on the fact that he was HIV positive. And so right before he passed away, Mike Lowry, the governor of Washington that helped me dedicate the panel for Cal and to the quilt, he commuted the sentence for Stephen Farmer. So when you go out there and it says AIDS is not a crime, but forced testing is, that's what that was in response to. And the colorful one up there is Ed Elliott's panel. So I actually haven't touched quilt for maybe 20 years or so. And when I was sitting there chatting with my friend Danny, and we're talking about the night Larry Kramer kissed me, and I needed to look something up. And so I went to Google, and Google said I was going to be in Omaha. And I was like, what? And so I click on it, and it says, yeah, and it's produced by Jannette Davis. I'm like, what? And so at that point, like almost immediately, like another hand was reaching for other computer to start typing to San Francisco, while one was reaching to type to Jannette, because I brought the quilt here, or was quilt display coordinator for a display that we did in the Civic Center, which I'm sure some people here remember the Civic Center. That display, because I always want to give Omaha like the props for this. That display was the first display ever that school kids came to, anywhere. All right, and all of them came. So because the school districts, Sarpy, Douglas, and Potawatomi, were worried that parents would flip out, they sent home things saying, is it okay if your kid goes and sees this thing? And I believe, if I remember correctly, only 7 families said no. And as someone who literally fled the state to come back and have the state say, you gotta get off your high horse, you little shit. The kids came, the kids were awesome. Like only one kid acted up, and he starts to run across the quilt, and I'm standing there looking at him, and he stops, and he looks down, and he very gingerly steps off the quilt, and just starts crying. And he's 14 or 15, so you're not generally where you're gonna, do that sort of thing. And I don't know what made him run. I don't know what made him stop. And I never will. But it was definitely a moment for him and a moment for me as well.
We've got probably time for one more question from audience, and then we're going to do a wrap up. Anything else? Yeah, Susan or Jill?
No, I was just, the quilt is such an incredible statement. It's political, it's heart-centered, it's very human. Were there other types of activism that you did? I've been studying, of course, Larry Kramer.
Right.
And just what a king, the reigning king of activism was, And I wonder what, all of the civil disobedience and arrests and all the things he did. I guess there was, I can't remember which newscaster, but a prominent newscaster, Larry Kramer and some of his compatriots busted in to a broadcast and shoved their faces between, I guess it was Walter Cronkite, and shoved their faces between Cronkite and the camera and yelled the slogan, incredible activism. What other kinds of activism have you been engaged in during the period?
So what was interesting back then is that there was no precedent for what a good queer was. So was it Charles Nelson Riley? I don't know. Was it Elton John? What were we trying to live up to? And so you had the Log Cabin Republicans, which were all of the gay Republicans, and then you had Queer Nation, where they were just, they'd have kiss-ins on buses and do all these crazy things. And then you'd have there was this whole pantheon of different groups you could join. At one point, I was a member of the Bi Fun Club, where all the bisexuals would show up and we'd have fun. And sometimes that was activism-y, and sometimes it was bowling, and it was just whatever it was. And to watch what has become of all of that has been pretty amazing. But back then, it was literally like there was there was like an Amazon that you could just order your particular type of activism from, and you could do, you know, do I want to go out and scream? Do I want to go work with people in hospices? Do I want to do this or do I want to do that? And a big part of what drove all of this was that suddenly we had this crisis to respond to that wasn't just like a crisis like some of us can't get a job, or our bosses, you know, demand sexual favors for us in order to just to keep our jobs, or whatever it might be. But it was that we actually had a true life-threatening emergency that all of a sudden then meant that we were doing things like literally building hospices like the Bailey Bichet House in Seattle, or institutions like the Omaha AIDS Project out on Maple, in Benson. That time was so active and so confusing and so wonderful and terrifying that we didn't notice what our options were. We didn't value what our options were because it was just so overwhelming, which I know probably isn't the best, you know, it isn't a list, but it was the case. Like, new groups would form and go away week by week, especially in Seattle and San Francisco, and Vancouver. We were just on fire at that point, and in the best possible way.
Thank you. I also wanted, I think you've all seen it, it's in the playbill and it was up here too. The BLUEBARN, a couple of years ago when they went to see the quilt, right? Youngsters, a big line of youngsters, right? But that also did shows in DC, and I love your thing of saying sometimes getting together and just having fun in the name of being true to yourself is a form of activism,
Very
right?
much so.
And I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Susan, but I think when Susan and I were talking about the show and have had a few conversations, right, and then around engagement, is the importance of never forgetting, right? And especially at this time when we're coming back around to a very what has already been contentious climate, right? But this, you know, 1992 feels like yesterday to me, and it feels like another universe to somebody who's 14 or 16. But I think that the importance of remembering and then bringing it forward and using that as a springboard to be there, be here now, right, for the things that are happening now, is so important. And I want to thank you, Jim, for all of your work and for hooking us up with the quilt and making sure that we could bring this night forward, and for you all for staying and for being here to share in this opportunity. We've got some other great stuff coming up, a panel next week with someone who was a member of Queer Nation and also in ACT UP in New York City at the time, is coming in and will be with and we'll have representation of the trans community, as well as looking at where are we going next. So a younger member who's very, very active in our community that's going to be presenting some, here's what you can do now, and here's what happened then, and here's what we can do now. And pink, pony up for PFLAG. In the last weekend, all along 10th and 13th, there are bars that are offering a signature drink, and we'll be putting some of those proceeds towards Parents and Friends of Lesbian and Gay PFLAG organization. So there's all sorts of ways you can still come out and celebrate, or come to the show again. Bring a friend, bring 5, right? But again, just want to thank you all for staying tonight, for chatting with us. Really appreciate it. So thank you.